Harris married his wife Beth in 1987. Beth has taught school for 15 years. They have 3 children: Laura, a kindergarten teacher; John, a law student at UNC Chapel Hill School of Law; and Matthew, who is currently a senior at Wake Forest University. Please welcome Mark Harris. And we will proceed the same way that we proceeded with the 6th District representatives, or candidates for that representation. We'll start with Dr. Brandon and move to Mr. Harris. We recently learned that the NSA was seizing the phone records of millions of Verizon customers without a warrant. It was Edward Snowden who revealed much of this. Is Edward Snowden a hero or a traitor? How do you believe the 4th Amendment requires America to deal with this problem where there are alleged national security issues?
Very important to understand, I believe in my heart, what the Constitution means and what its limitations are. It does, I think Article 1, Section 8 has 18 functions, but how you count it. But it actually tells the federal government what it must do. No more, no less. The Bill of Rights, which is in the 4th Amendment, does not grant one single right. It clarifies God-given natural rights in which the federal government can never infringe upon, ever. When you think back historically in that time, when you had people going through doors of private houses, collecting papers anytime they wanted. Today we have Verizon collecting every data you have. If your cell phone's on right now, it's collecting data going to the Utah building. The 4th Amendment says you're safe in your persons, your papers, your properties. Snowden is interesting. By telling the truth, is he a hero? By breaking the law, is he a criminal? The truth had to come out. How long we allow people to work under the idea of the government protection and not be allowed to say freely what has to occur? There's no doubt our founders talked about secrecy and certain things in defense. But we have to understand the most important role of a government is to protect the individuals' inalienable rights. And the NDA attacks the individuals' inalienable rights.
I think it's important to understand there is no government agency, no law that should ever be above the supreme law of the land, the United States Constitution, and that's what the NSA, in my view, has done. Here's how they've done it. With every contract that you sign, with a cell phone, a cable provider, you name it, in that fine print you never read, it essentially says they're going to be able to do with your information whatever they want to do. And by virtue that you continue that relationship, you fund that, you allow that to happen, and the NSA simply takes their collections and utilizes it. Now, regarding Mr. Snowden, his oath to office, the oath that he took to serve, is what we have to look at. Always remember that it's a government that we have not of men, but of laws. And I would say, let the laws determine what happens to Mr. Snowden. I don't know. I don't have all the information. That's why we have trials. But I'll tell you this. If he did what he did in order to preserve his oath, he is not guilty. If he did what he did to damage the United States and demean his oath, then he should go to jail for a long time. I hope that answers the question. Thank you.
I think we all agree tonight that the NSA is wrong and it absolutely violates our constitutional rights as it's written in the 4th Amendment. However, Mr. Snowden, according to what he said, did what he did because he thought it was right, but he has even admitted to going in to do just that. Now, we needed to know, the American people needed to know what the NSA was doing, but Mr. Snowden needs to come back to America. He needs to face the people that he has made these accusations that we're now finding out are true, and he needs to sit in court in front of a jury of his peers and let those people decide, because that is what our judicial branch of government is all about.
When we consider the NSA and what they have done, I fully recognize that we live in an interesting era. We live in a day of incredible technology, advances in technology. And because of that, this is going to be an issue that continues to come up again and again. And if we don't get it right now and understand that as the technology continues to grow and the abilities that we have continue to increase in surveillance of individuals, We must learn once and for all that they can only operate within the boundaries of the law. And the law protects the citizens of the United States of America. We are protected above all. As far as Snowden is concerned, as I've considered all of the things and thought about his position, I've often thought, and it was said a moment ago, that he told the truth. And is he a criminal? And I think the answer is yes and yes. I think he told the truth, but I think he is a criminal. And what I wish could have happened, and would hope would happen in the future with any other NSA agent, is that they would come to the office of United States Senator Mark Harris and share with me the information that he had and give me an opportunity as the elected official to step to the forefront and tell the truth. That's what needed to happen. Had he gone a different route and handled it in a different way, he may very well have been a hero. Thank you.
Next question will begin with Mr. Flynn, move to the left, and end with Dr. Brandon. We recently debated military action in Syria. We've been in Iraq and Afghanistan for 12 years. Under what circumstances is it constitutionally acceptable to undertake military action against a foreign nation? What is the role of Congress in this process?
Part of that, you have to go back to the War Powers Act of 1973. And Congress did something then that was totally not able to be done. They delegated the power of the declaration of war, and in essence, allowing the president to make this determination. Congress does not have the authority to delegate any constitutional power. So that very much changed the dynamic that we see. And I think if you looked at a chart from 1973 through today, you would see that there's an awful lot more intervention of the United States around the world, because now the executive is the one that makes that determination too many times. The thing that struck me most about Syria and this president was the moral authority that he lacked. When he takes the idea that there are children dying as a reason to commit the United States forces, and I see how he responds to the issue of abortion, the idea that children can be taken from the womb and killed, or even post-birth abortion that he actually stood for in the Illinois Senate. He has no moral authority in the worldview, certainly in my view. The question also is, where is the appropriate authority for the United States government to go? I think it has to come down to this. We must be free in the United States of America to go wherever the United States interest is concerned. Not to depend upon an agreement with the United Nations to say it's okay, because we must maintain our sovereignty and our ability to go in the world wherever it is that our security interests are concerned. It is not up to the UN to determine that, it's up to the United States. And as long as we do it constitutionally, that's the issue that I would be supporting. Thank you very much.
Congress is the only people who truly have the authority to declare war. For me, having served in the military, having worked with those men and women who came back from Iraq and Afghanistan, I can truly tell you that the only time we should go to war is to protect our own, to protect our nation, to protect our soldiers, to have protected in Benghazi. That is when we should be going to war, not at the whim of our executive.
Could you repeat the question one more time?
Sure. We recently debated military action in Syria. We've been in Iraq and Afghanistan for 12 years. Under what circumstances is it constitutionally acceptable to undertake military action against a foreign nation? What is the role of Congress in this process?
Well, I would say that the role of Congress is to be the one to make that declaration of war. And I believe, and I think I heard it stated earlier in the Congressional forum, that really and truly, it's if and only if the national security interests of the United States of America are at stake. Ladies and gentlemen, we have watched as this president has almost single-handedly in these last years really and truly set America back on the world stage in terms of our reputation and our standing. We must step forward and regain and understand again. This whole foreign policy of leading from behind, let's just be truthful about it. He has failed to lead. And the United States Senate has failed to lead. We need leaders today who understand the responsibility of being able to make that declaration of war, but leaders who understand it will be only in those circumstances where we truly define as the national interest, national security interest of the United States are at stake. Thank you.
Constitution, first time, every time, only time. What we have to look at is what the Constitution says. We've had 5 declared wars in American history, 5. The last one was in 1942, Romania chose the Axis side. Because of this idea of executive privilege, which was the first time ever quoted in 1958, when the Senate, we're running for a job to be interviewed, to what role is a senator? According to Hamilton, the senator is joint with the executive for foreign policy. In fact, in the Articles of Confederation, the Senate had all the power for foreign policy. The only thing they added with the executive there was to actually be another person there to be a bulwark with the Senate, work together. They actually called it, again, joint foreign policy. The other role of the government, the only role the president has in foreign policy that's exclusively his alone, is to say hello to ministers and ambassadors. That is it. Because we have men and women who run for office and are not vetted properly to understand the rule book they're applying for, one cannot lead unless they know what they're reading and understanding. That's what this whole process is about. The foreign policy with Syria, was it better for us to attack Syria when we have Russia over there with their naval bases? See, the thought process was not there because we had an executive overstepping his bounds, but the Senate not holding him accountable. Our founders debated clearly. They said, Madison said, we'll never put the power to go from a state of peace to a state of war in one individual's hands, ever. We have an Augustinian foreign policy, which is defensive. Jefferson says his actual responsibility stops in defensive mode. So this is what's happening. We understand this now because we're watching the abuse of power. We're going to get back to the understanding the rule of law. We're going to take our position back, and it's going to come back. I appreciate it.
We'll start with Mrs. Grant and move through to Mr. Flynn. Mrs. Grant, what are your top 3 priorities that will allow America to once again experience a constitutional republic and a renewed, vibrant economy?
For me, taking back our country and getting it back to where it needs to be revolves around limiting our government. In order to do that, we have to start with spending. We have to balance the budget and we have to look at where we can cut money from areas that are no longer needed, like the EPA, the Department of Education, trimming down the IRS. The second thing we need to do in that is changing our taxes. If that means getting a new amendment passed or repealing the 16th Amendment, I am okay with that. I am a firm believer that the fair tax is a great way to go because it taxes people who would not otherwise pay taxes. Where I live now, I would not have believed it, but there is a lot of illegal activity with prescription narcotics. Guess what? Those people no longer make that much money because they are taxed on what they spend, not what they earn. And that to me is the better part of the fair tax versus the flat tax because I get to get the government totally out of my paycheck. The third thing would be to limit our elected officials. Too often we send good, well-meaning people up there. They serve their first and second terms in the Senate, third, fourth, fifth in Congress, and the next thing you know, they have forgotten what it is like to be a true individual living the American way of life, worried about your house payment, your car payment, putting your children through school, because they are insulated. And we need to stop that and send citizen legislators up there to represent the citizens, especially now more than ever. 2014 is our time to step forward. Thank you.
The 3 things that I think are absolutely critical are the things that I've been talking about as key for a domestic agenda. Number 1, we've got to restore in our nation's capital and among our nation's leaders again a healthy respect for the United States Constitution. We have got to reach that point again where we understand and proclaim our right to speak freely, our right to worship God as we please, or to not to worship Him if we please not to. The right for law-abiding citizens to own a gun without the fear of the government coming in and taking it away from them. We must restore that sacred trust that's been given to us in that document. Secondly, we must shrink the size of a government that I think all of us in this room tonight agree on is a government on steroids. Just about everybody here would agree that we have a government, a federal government tonight, who taxes too much, spends too much, wastes too much, and it has become far too intrusive in our daily lives. We must get that under control. And by the way, while we're doing that, we need to repeal Obamacare once and for all and help the government understand that they do not belong in our healthcare business in this nation. And then the third and final thing in that domestic agenda would be for real tax reform. Tax reform that truly helps the middle class. Tax reform that really lifts small businesses in our country. Because it's then and only then that we're going to see a free market that really is what drives the economic engine in this country. When we begin to do those three things, we'll see a strong domestic agenda that can make a difference in our nation today. Thank you.
Number one, audit the Fed and repeal the Fed. Number two, eliminate income tax. What we have right now is we have a federal government deciding what percentage of your labor you get to keep.
That's right.
The only role of government, according to John Locke, is to protect one's individual's private property. Your labor is your private property. Number three, a constitutional dollar. That means backed by gold and silver. The fiat currency from 1913 to today, your dollar is worth 99% less value than it was 100 years ago. From 1792 to 1913, your dollar increased 17% because it's backed by gold and silver. The Coinage Act of 1792 said a silver piece was 371.25 grains of silver. A gold piece was 371.5 grains of gold. Now go invent and do something. True capitalism, true free markets. That's what built America. You cannot fix the economy, fix spending, when right now we have over $222 trillion, fiat dollars, of unfunded liabilities with Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security alone. The true thing is not put a Band-Aid on the Titanic. It's not to hit the iceberg in the first place. What we must do is get back to the constitutional dollar. And Obamacare, 1/5 of our economy, destroys every aspect of our life. It is not affordable, it does not give health care. Now we're looking for people to understand this Constitution. Ms. Hagan, did she read the Dodd-Frank bill? Well, I did. Did she read HR 3590? I did. We're going to look for professionals to understand this idea of what you have to do with the rule of law, and that frees everybody here as individuals.
One of the great things about being last on this question is I have time to sit there and think of something that's going to be different. I'm going with the 3 E's on this one. The 3 E's would be the enormity of government. And always remember, the larger this federal government has grown, the more your liberty is squeezed down. You feel it, don't you? You feel the oppression of this government, and it must stop. And somebody up here is going to be a part of doing that, and I hope you'll help us get there. It's very important to understand that enormity squeezes out what it is to be American. So the enormity of the government we must take on. We must squeeze down these enormous agencies and eliminate them. And take out these rogue agencies that are telling us how to live our lives. Secondly, the economy. The economy has to be repaired. But the government doesn't repair the economy as much as get out of the way of people that know how to make things work. That's not a tough lesson. We're asking the government to do less and to do with less. That means lower taxes. Oh, I think all of us are about that. The third E I would propose to you is a word that it took the president of Russia to remind us how important it is to our country. That word is exceptionalism. And America is exceptional. And Vladimir Putin said it's dangerous for somebody to think of themselves as exceptional in a nation. And he's exactly right. It's dangerous to the tyrant. It's dangerous to the socialist and to the Marxist, isn't it?
Isn't it?
So let's take advantage of these 3 E's and understand that the core of American exceptionalism is articulated in our Declaration of Independence, that we are endowed by our Creator with those unalienable rights. Government doesn't give us those. Government's job is to protect those. Help me do that. Thank you.
Today I spent some time with college students and spoke to a high school class right here in Greensboro. Yeah. There they are. They're here. And I asked them about formulating a question for you. This is done together with them. Very similar to a question that was asked to the 6th district representatives, at least candidates for that position. The Republicans of North Carolina will have to decide which of you best reflects their values. Why should they vote for you over the 3 other candidates on stage tonight? And as you answer that question, what founding father best reflects your philosophy of government? We'll start with Mr. Harris and we'll end with Mrs. Grant.
Well, when I think about, let me go with the founding fathers first, and that would be that when I think about Thomas Jefferson and his understanding of the importance of states' rights, that really and truly, until we recognize in this country that our states must have the ability to govern themselves and make those decisions, we're going to continue to see a federal government on steroids that is out of control. What I believe separates me tonight, and the reason that really I'm in this race to run for the United States Senate, is because I've had the privilege for the last 26 years of walking through life with people, serving as a senior pastor in this state. I've come to understand that as I walk through life with people in these 26 years, it's interesting because the same concerns as I started as a 22-year-old young pastor are the same concerns I've seen in the congregation at First Baptist Charlotte some 8.5 years after serving there. People today are worried. They're worried about a sluggish economy. They're worried about eroding values we're seeing in the culture. They're worried about a federal government that intrudes into our lives more and more every day. But I think the greatest concern I've got and the greatest worry I've seen in their eyes, and what really moved me to this race, is they're reaching a tipping point that they're concerned and worried that they have elected officials that just don't care anymore. You see, I learned as a young man enough about the system of government growing up. And I understand that in our form of government, when the people lose the hope and the people cross that tipping point where they feel like leaders no longer care, that we're in danger like never before. I'm here today because I do care. I care about my family. I care about your families. I care about this state. And I care about this nation. I want to be there as a North Carolina voice for North Carolina values. Thank you.
I'm here because I have 7 children. I've delivered about 9,000 children. I believe that this generation does not stand up for the truth. We're going to leave a less free America for them. We know that if we do not fight for this and stand up now, what kind of generation are we? 2 questions that I asked myself. Who is sovereign, and what is the legitimate role of government? The Creator made us in His image. He's sovereign. We're stewards on earth. We have inalienable rights from Him. Life, from the moment of conception to natural passing and everywhere in between. Liberty, with its freedom and responsibility, and the pursuit of your American dream. And what makes American dream so great is not succeeding. It's that many times you could fail and get back up. Now, the role of government's the next question. It's the next sentence. Both these are answered in Jefferson's second paragraph of the Declaration. The only role of government is to protect the individual's inalienable rights. It's the individual over the collective. And that makes society at its best. So why me? I talk about delivering babies, but I deal with surgery. I don't get a second chance in surgery. I don't get a second chance with that life. I had to prepare and study 15 years after high school before I had the scalpel in my hand for the first time by myself. I prepared for this. I've read the documents, I studied how to apply it. We need those core foundational principles. Take any issue of today, because men have never changed. They always want to rule other men. We take those issues of today through the prism of the Constitution, and that's our answer. It's simple. There are 18 functions the federal government can do and must do. The checks and balances is not just horizontal between the legislative, executive, and judicial. It's also vertical, and the sovereign on top is you. The state's responsibility is to protect you. That's why Article 6, Clause 2 allows us to have no Obamacare in this state. And everybody should come to the Socratic method and be taught. Every candidate. Thank you.
The question was, which of our founding fathers and why me? First of all, I'm honored to share a birthday with Thomas Jefferson. It's April 13th. You remember and make use of that. But I have to defer to George Washington, because George Washington, he recognized he wasn't the most educated of our founders. He recognized he had some gifts and some talents, I think. But he also recognized something very, very essential that we have to recognize in our country today. He used the term the sacred fire of liberty. Sacred fire of liberty. Our founders understood the word liberty to mean free to pursue the will of God in your life. That's the whole concept about limited government and self-governance. So I have to defer to George Washington in that sense. The other question is, why me? And I must tell you, I'm totally honored to be on the stage with these kinds of folks today, and with you here today, because I know we're here about the same reason, and that is to change our country in a positive way and move things forward for the state of North Carolina. How do we do that? We have to have people that understand the Constitution, I think fundamentally, yes. We also have to have people that understand and can and show the ability to articulate these things. There were two great Republicans that showed us that pathway who also share the same occupation that I do. One was Jesse Helms, a broadcaster. The other was Ronald Reagan. We have to be able to take a message. And before we get to the Senate, we have to be able to win the election. And I'll tell you, we have to have somebody with a proven ability to speak not just about these tenets, but to speak directly to a female audience, because they're going to make a big decision here. And for 30 years, well, 20-some years, my job is dependent upon reaching and proving the ability to reach women with a message of 25 years to 65 years old. That's why. Thank you.
In 2009, I chose to raise my hand and take an oath to protect the Constitution. When I did that, I did it not because I thought it was going to be the greatest adventure of my life, because I felt that just the Army was going to be the greatest thing for me. I did it because I saw the military as an underserved population. They were screaming for doctors and nurses. They needed my service. They needed my degree. When I was doing my last job, I realized that those soldiers needed me way more than my family at times needed me, because I have a wonderful husband who stood in my stead with my kids. And I came home and I realized that the American people are now our underserved population. Our representatives in no way, shape, form, or fashion take our daily lives into consideration as they move forward with their decisions, with their laws, and allowing these regulations that continue to come out of Washington, D.C. I fought for what I believed in when I wore a uniform and as a lieutenant reported to colonels and generals who held my life in the palm of their hand and always said, "With all due respect, sir, with all due respect, ma'am, you're wrong." I am the person who will go to D.C., look those people in the eye, know they can't touch me, and still say, "With all due respect, sir, with all due respect, ma'am, you are wrong. It is unconstitutional. It is not what our people need." I want to go because I'm ready to serve an underserved population again. And I feel like when we ask about our founding fathers, I think about it and I look at it. And honestly, I think it's Madison. He's the one who worked the hardest, who was there through it all, and who understood about limited federal government and knowing what our states needed and what held our government together. Thank you.
We now move to the rapid fire round. We'll begin with Dr. Brannon and Mr. Flynn. Do you believe we have an activist judiciary? If so, just relax. If so, what do you see can be done as a senator to constitutionally rein in the courts and restore a true balance of power? Does the Supreme Court really have the last word?
How long is this session? 30 seconds? The Constitution gives the legislative branch 33 functions, the executive branch 13, and again only one by himself, 6 judicial branch. The Congress is actually superior to the Supreme Court in things that are not listed, those 6 things. Hamilton said in the 78th paper, they have no power to enforce their opinion. It's just their opinion. The famous Mayberry case, Marshall and Jefferson, they were cousins, which is funny, said that is not settled law. This idea that we actually traded a king for people in black robes to be over us and have an oligarchy is unacceptable. It's un-American. The Supreme Court does not have 9 judges via the Constitution. There's no number. And the state marshal, 1788, in the Virginia Ratification Convention, was asked by Henry that same question. And Marshall said no. In the things that are not listed in Article 1, Section 8, the state is superior. Amen. That is why it's frustrating to hear people tell us they know what they're talking about when they're telling us 2 + 2 is 5, sometimes 3. Law is not made for the bench. The Obamacare. We had an unconstitutional, unenumerated function get through the Congress. The executive put his name on it. Judicial branch said it was now a tax, which in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 1, it's not a tax. And then the amendments to it to make it law was done by the executive, by the judicial branch. This is because we have state legislators too, and representatives at the Senate level and the state and the House level, do not know the power they have. Every congressman, when you guys win, you have the power for inquiry in every single action. And the Senate is the representative. I'm going to be an ambassador from our sovereign state to hold them accountable. So the answer is no more judicial action.
If you're just getting here, my name is Bill Flynn. If you've been here, remember that because it's a free plug again. So the whole idea of the judiciary, keep in mind, if you look at the Constitution, Article 1 has 9 different sections to it. Article which talks about the Congress. Article 2 talks about the executive branch. There are 4 sections in that. And Article 3 talks about the judiciary, and there's 3 sections in that. With the idea of a co-equal branch of government really is not the case. Congress is the closest thing to the people, and therefore rightfully should be the most powerful. If you read your Constitution, it tells you judges serve on good behavior. I can't speak for you, but I can tell you how I see it. When Justice Ginsburg, out of this country, says she would not use the United States Constitution and defers to the Constitution of South Africa as a superior document, she needs to be impeached. Men and women to stand up. Thank you. I don't really need this, but it's okay. We need men and women to understand that is their job that they are mandated to do under their oath of office. Absolutely, we have an activist judiciary. When a judge acts on an agenda and not the law, that is bad behavior, and that judge needs to be removed from the bench routinely. And if we do it just a couple of times, yes, if we do this just a couple of times, that will be enough to send a powerful message We have to understand how this is organized, how this is structured. Because the tyranny of the judiciary is one of the reasons we had to pass the marriage amendment in North Carolina. It cannot be allowed to stand, and we must stand against these judges and remove them from office. Thank you.
Mrs. Grant and Mr. Harris, when the Constitution was originally ratified in 1788, it was the state legislators that decided who their senators would be. The 17th Amendment allows the people to decide today who their senators will be. Would you support an amendment to the Constitution that would take that power from the people and give it to the state legislatures? Why or why not?
Actually, yes, I would. Because as a senator, my job is to represent the state. We have congressmen and women who are elected from smaller districts for the simple fact that they represent the people. And back when our Constitution was originally written, those men and women, or men back then, of the House of Representatives went around to local areas. That's why their districts were small. It was made so they could meet with the men and women and find out what they needed in our area. And it was the Senate's job to then go in and represent the state government and the best interests of the state with who was being appointed by our president and what was coming from the House through the Senate as far as budget and legislation. So yes, I would support amendment because I fully believe that part of our problem today is that our state governments are not truly represented and our senators do not always have our states, including our people and their jobs and the regulations that affect their daily lives at the heart of the decisions they're making.
The 17th Amendment allows the people to decide who their senators will be. Would you support an amendment to the Constitution that would take that power from the people and give it to the state legislatures? Why or why not?
I don't believe I would support that amendment to take it out of the hands of the people. You know, we talk about being the people here who love the Constitution of the United States. But it seems like oftentimes we spend an awful lot of our conversation talking about amending this and amending that and changing this and changing that. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm convinced at the heart of America right now, we've got a system that if we really and truly stepped up to the plate and carried out our responsibilities as citizens to become informed, to become involved, and to vote, that we will solve many of the problems that we have in this nation today. Listen, we need to recognize it starts with we, the people. And we have that opportunity. We have a system in place that can work. But we've got to begin to work the system, and it goes back to what I said earlier. I fear our people are too busy looking at our leadership in our nation, and they're losing hope because they are beginning to think they no longer have elected officials that care. We need to begin to put up candidates for offices in this nation who are respectable, who are trustworthy, who will stand by their word, and who bring integrity back in the process. And when you have that, once again, the system we currently have of the people of the state electing their United States Senator will work. I firmly believe that.
The next question is for Mr. Flynn and Mrs. Grant. The U.S. has a history of presidents who issue executive orders. President Obama is no exception. There is no explicit claim in the Constitution that allows for these sorts of orders to be issued. What will you do as a senator to stop this practice using the Constitution as your guide?
The executive order was put into place only to support existing law. And what we've ended up with is a measure for the executive to actually speak law into effect with an executive order. It is inappropriate, it is wrong, and the thing that's missing, and the grand silence in the room, is the fact that we have too many people in Congress, I'm sorry to say, on the Republican side, that don't have the backbone to stand up and say, stop, Mr. President. That's a road too far. We have to have men and women that understand what's going on and are willing to do that. I do believe the executive order, when applied properly, as a function of the job of the executive branch, and that is, the enforcement of the law and bringing together the law. There can be opportunities where that is helpful. But when it's used to legislate, that's a problem. Additionally, I'd like to play off that just a little bit more. When we write into law the ability, in this case with Obamacare, for Kathleen Sebelius to speak law into effect, and we have the absurdity of people in Congress going to the president saying, please, Mr. President, will you change this law? That should tell everybody in this room there's something terribly wrong with the organizational structure and understanding of the execution of government in this country, that we must stand and fight. Because if we don't, we are not going. Congress has been showing itself repeatedly, and I would say maliciously, to be irrelevant. We need people of backbone willing to stand and say, this has gone too far, whether it's the executive order, whether it's the way we're writing bills and allowing them to go forward. We must stop this. We must return the power of Congress, and really the power of the people, back to the rightful home. Thank you.
The executive order is supposed to be a way for the president to explain something. From my military time, I look at it like this. I would have an operations order. From that operations order, we would have a foundation of how I was supposed to do my job. On a daily basis, I would issue an explanation about certain circumstances to those soldiers and civilians who worked under me. And that is all an executive order is supposed to be. It is not the op-ord. It is not the law. It is not the structure for it. It is an explanation of it. And when our president goes beyond that and issues law by executive order, he is wrong. He has stepped outside his bounds, and he has actually committed an impeachable offense. This one has committed quite a few. As a U.S. Senator, it would be my job to work with the House and show my support for those who would want to bring articles of impeachment, and that you turn around as a senator when we sit that impeachment court to do what I know is right and impeach a president who has broken the law.
This question is from Mr. Harris and Dr. Brandon. The Second Amendment says, shall not infringe. However, we infringe on the rights of felons, the mentally disabled, and the underage to own a gun. Indeed, government does place limitations on the right to bear arms. What limitations, from your perspective, should government be able to place on gun ownership and possession?
Boy, thank you for that question. I really believe that the limitations on owning a gun would only be those that would be upon those who have a criminal record that we need to be concerned with. I believe that we really and truly in this country should have the right to own a firearm, properly trained, and be able to defend ourselves without the fear of the government coming and infringing upon that right. We've seen in our time period leadership in Washington, D.C. that has taken opportunities to be reactive and to try to push legislation that has infringed upon every gun owner's rights and everything they could to try to infringe upon them. I'll give you a great example. When we watched all of the things that have transpired in national tragedies over the last couple of years, whether you were in Aurora, Colorado, or whether you were in Newtown, Connecticut, or whether you were in the naval shipyards and you saw these incidents occur, you saw this administration and Senator Kay Hagan and others jump up with immediate reaction that we must offer more gun control laws. Ladies and gentlemen, all those incidents that I just listed had three things in common. They had someone involving a mental illness. They had someone that was involved with violence through the entertainment industry. And they had someone that had experienced the breakdown of the family. Those three things were common in every one of those mass shootings. This federal government has done nothing to address those issues, but rather try to create reaction in the people to infringe upon our Second Amendment rights. I think that's wrong, and as your United States Senator, I want to protect the Second Amendment rights of our citizens.
Well, I've been endorsed by the National Association of Gun Rights, Dudley Brown personally. As I said before earlier on, the Bill of Rights is not a list of rights at all. It does not grant one single right. It declares God-given natural rights in which the federal government can never infringe upon. Ever. The first natural law is self-defense. I'm not going to have the federal government overstep its bounds. It says it should make no law. End of story. The federal government cannot debate this. This should be a local and state issue. There's no incorporation clause in the Constitution that takes the first 8 amendments of the Bill of Rights. So at the state level, we can locally decide who gets guns, who does not get guns that are in that case. My problem is, if we have the federal government tell you what, if you've been on Zoloft before for postpartum depression, you can't now defend yourself naturally? The idea of the Second Amendment was not to go hunting. It was to defend ourselves from a tyrannical government.
Right.
3 weeks ago, I was hammered on MSNBC, your favorite station, by Reverend Sharpton, because I used the word tyranny. The Declaration of Independence articulates 28 tyrannical events.
Right.
If you want to cry, read them today. They're occurring today.
Exactly.
If we do not understand what the Second Amendment means fully, then we're going to lose it. We're going to give it away. So I'm running for a federal position. I will defend Article 6, Clause 2 till the state legislators say we will only allow laws that are pursuant thereof, enumerated, no more, no less, in our sovereign state.
Mr. Flynn and Mr. Harris, we've talked a little bit about the Affordable Health Care Act, as they call it, and we would like to know in concrete terms, how will you fix the problem as a senator to the Affordable Health Care Act that has been ruled to be constitutional by the U.S. Supreme Court?
Well, first of all, I'd like to ask for our money back on that stupid website. That'd be $650+ million right there. The Supreme Court has a relatively storied history of getting it wrong. The Supreme Court has it wrong on Obamacare. Where in the enumerated powers of the United States Constitution does it grant the United States government the authority to force you to buy anything?
Right. Amen.
Really, think about that. There is no authority. We must, as citizens, we must always begin to ask the question, when government acts to do anything, by what authority is the government acting in this way? By what authority is the president speaking here? By what authority is this judiciary moving forward? So I think the idea that Kay Hagan has is to, well, we can fix this Obamacare and we can make it better. That's like putting brand new tires on a junkyard automobile that's never going to go anywhere. You can't fix this. So what is the solution? And I think the solution is something that's really at our fingertips right here. The best and most sophisticated and fastest and most efficient way to deliver health care is with the private sector. Yes, there can be some government or regulation, which only should mean to make regular. But let me suggest one thing that would change the dynamic directly. That, by the way, all of us understand Obamacare is about moving everything to a single-payer system, right? That's unacceptable. It's un-American. It's a socialistic, collectivist view that doesn't belong in America. We're about preserving the individual and seeing that individual. One thing we can do is to grant Medicaid dollars to the states that will lower the cost, improve the outcome, and return the power to the states. That is one example I have time for. Thank you.
Well, I agree with Bill. This is not the Affordable Care Act cannot be fixed. It must be repealed. It is something that we cannot be able to make tweaks to because at the heart of it is something that doesn't work. The Congressional Budget Office tells us the reality that by 2023, under Obamacare, we will be spending $3 trillion on health care in this nation. And as when I share that with people, they look at me and they go, well, but you know, we've heard so many billions, and so what's 1 trillion here, another trillion here? Just to put it in perspective, our federal government this year will spend $3.7 trillion in total. So by 2023, now not even a decade, just 9 years away, that we will be spending $3 trillion just on health care. It is unsustainable and it cannot stand. And we have a responsibility to repeal it. And ladies and gentlemen, Republicans have had answers. We've just not had anybody with a backbone, and we haven't had anybody that can communicate those answers to the American people to get behind it. There's some very practical solutions. Number one, we need to expand health savings accounts in this nation. Number two, we need to allow people to purchase their health insurance across state lines, increasing the competition. Number three, we need to put an end to the frivolous lawsuits that continue to drive up the cost of health care each and every year. Listen to me. Those are very practical, free market systems that will drive the economic engine of our country. We just need to communicate that message, and we need to put some leaders in Washington, D.C. that will stand on those principles. Thank you.
Dr. Brannon and Mrs. Grant. President Clinton signed the Defense of Marriage Act, and President Obama initially indicated he would enforce it. He has since switched positions, and the Supreme Court has ruled the Defense of Marriage Act unconstitutional. How do you define marriage? And do you believe this is a federal or state issue? If you believe it is a federal issue, by what authority under the Constitution are you permitted to deal with this issue?
Marriage is a God-given, ordained, special thing. I've been with my wife for 26 years. We don't need any government to tell us what marriage is. It's a man and a woman. If we had to sit and wait what the idea of marriage was from the federal government, they may change it down the line. I voted for Amendment 1 because I'm not going to let New York, California, or Vermont tell us what marriage is. Churches must stand up. Churches must stand up. Because the nucleus of society is the family. Not everybody gets a daddy and a mommy. I only had a mom. But that nucleus makes society strong. We have to run to those things. In the Constitution is the question. At the federal level, Article 1, Section 8, there's no marriage. But at the state level, the 9th Amendment, the 10th Amendment, Article 6, Clause 2, we have the power, and we used it to defend what marriage is. So that's why it's important to delineate what a good idea is and what's a constitutional idea. Because we don't want it because we have the power to say what we want, because we're in charge. That's tyranny again. It's the rule of men. And I believe today we're being attacked in the most insidious of ways, from within. We must understand and send somebody to the Senate that understands what advice and consent means. Any senator that voted for a Supreme Court justice that was asked a question, can you make America eat 3 vegetables a day, said yes. And now she's Supreme Court. The senators should be impeached. So churches, with the government out of its way, stand up, and in love and kindness, for those who disagree with that, we could show them historically, economically, what truly marriage has done to society. Thank you.
I was raised and I firmly believe marriage is between one man and one woman. And the federal government does not have the right to tell anyone except for our military what the definition of marriage is. And that is only because the federal government does control our military. Now, when DOMA was struck down, a lot of people were very upset about this. We had lots of conversations about this. But the one thing we have to realize is that is something for our state to define as a whole, if we, the people of that state, wish to define it in our Constitution. Otherwise, just as Dr. Brandon said, it is our role as Christians in our churches to stand up and talk to people about it. And I'll be the first one to tell you, I don't hate anyone. I may not agree with everything you say. You may not agree with everything I say. But I'd rather have you as my friend that agrees on a majority of things with me than my enemy who only disagrees on one or two. Because I'll be honest with you, we'll go a lot farther and we'll get a lot more done agreeing on those majority of things than focusing on those one or two things that we don't agree with. And so we need to stand up together and lovingly say, marriage is one man, one woman, and the federal government cannot define it for anybody but our military. And I would hope that fellow senators and our House of Representatives would understand that when we define that for the military, we should look to the people and their definition of it before we define it any other way for those men and women in uniform.
Mr. Flynn and Dr. Brannon. Mr. Flynn. Mark Levin, in his recent book, The Liberty Amendments, proposed the following idea. 2/3 of Congress should be able to overturn a Supreme Court decision. Should the legislature be able to overturn a U.S. Supreme Court decision short of a constitutional amendment?
I believe the power of the Congress is there for a reason. And I have to say that the Congress does have the ability to take out of play, to take out of the arena of contention, a Supreme Court decision. Let's go back to, for example, the idea of marriage. I take a different view than I've heard expressed here. I believe that the United States government and every law is bound by the wide parameters of the laws of nature, and nature's God. That's a very simple thing. You can't put into law something that doesn't fit in that box. So Congress, I think, does have an absolute role to take advantage of. And we must be ready to step out and say, wait a minute, we cannot allow, as I mentioned before, the judiciary tyranny to roll things forward. Now, I want to talk a little bit more about Levin's book. He talks about the Article 5 Convention of States. And as this is a convention of states, I would submit the following, that we don't really have the opportunity. It's inappropriate for somebody, in my view, that's running for a federal office to advise a state prerogative on how to move forward on that. My job would be find out what the state has decided and move forward. But it is very, very important that the Congress really understand its power and to understand it has to flex that power and not back away from it and not be held to intimidation by the judiciary. And if there's a question of power, we have to, I think, have it resolved at the level of that which is most powerful. The co-equal idea of branches of government, I think, is flawed. I think that Congress is the ultimate authority of the three branches if there is a disturbance. Thank you.
This goes back to true federalism. I said before, the Supreme Court has 6 functions and none of them is to enforce their opinions. None. So we don't need the Congress to override their stuff. What you can do is if they pass a law such as, we'll say, Obamacare, and they say it's a tax, go to the Constitution, Article 1, Section 7, Clause 1, House defunded. See, we have historical data to show this. Now, who is superior to every issue that's not enumerated? Dean Kramer, 2004, Stanford Law School, said the individual. Madison said the individual. Jefferson said the individual. Who's supposed to protect the individual when the federal government oversteps its bounds? Not far from here, 1788, Hillsborough Convention. We went over the Constitution for a week and a half. We went through it clause by clause and voted no the first time. That question was asked. What happens if the federal government makes a law that's not there? James Iredell, who actually became one of the first Supreme Court justices, said, if the Congress ever passes a law, Supreme Court passes it as a law that's not enumerated, it is null and void in the state. Our governor at the time said, if they try that, we'll make them pay. What we must do is understand that compact, that contract. When it says we the people, actually it was we the states. And James Wilson in the Committee of Style himself changed it to we the states. Henry was furious at this because it made like a national government. We're a federal government. What he wanted was, he said, I'm not sure which states are going to approve it. But Article 7 proves this is a compact because each state had one vote. So we're not going to go bow our knee to the judicial branch or the government when they don't have a position that way. We must understand, again, I will defend this Constitution with every fiber of my body. Thank you.
I wish we had time for more questions. At this point, we're going to move to 1-minute summations. We'll start with Mr. Harris and move to the right and end with Dr. Brandon. Please tell us why you should be the person to replace Senator Kay Hagan.
Well, first of all, let me thank all of you and thank C4GC, that is a tongue twister, for the opportunity of being here. And let me just say congratulations and thank you to all of these candidates, because I just want to tell you something from the bottom of my heart today. Any one of the four of us up here on our worst day will be better than Kay Hagan. Because I truly believe that it is time for leadership in Washington, D.C. It is time to have a North Carolina voice that will stand for North Carolina values. People ask me sometimes as a pastor, they said, you know, will you really be able to stand strong? 3 words have been on my heart ever since I began to ponder taking this incredible step in my life. 3 words that would mark me as a candidate and as your United States Senator is the word character, is the word consistency, and it's the word courage. I commit to you that if in the providence of God and in the voters of North Carolina, if you'll place me in the United States Senate, I will not disappoint you. I will be your United States Senator based on character, consistency, and courage. God bless you.
The same oath that our congressmen and women take, I have already taken. Now, when I took off my uniform and I put on my civilian clothes, I did not take off that oath. That is why I'm here. That is why I'm running, because that oath still means as much to me today as it did in July of 2009 when I took it the very first time. When I go to Washington, I go to represent. I don't go to stay. But while I'm there, one of the things I can promise you I can do as a citizen legislator is look to who I'm going to mentor to take my place. Because the only way we can move forward and take back our country and keep that going is for our leaders of tomorrow to mentor the leaders of the tomorrow after that. That is one thing we have forgotten, and that is one thing the military taught me well, was that if you want the person to succeed you, to be successful and to be able to do the job and continue your legacy, you must lay the groundwork for that person. You must encourage them and you must help them along the way. I am here to serve. I want to continue to serve like I did before, and by doing that, I want to serve North Carolina, serve our Republican Party, and serve the people by helping pave for future generations. Thank you.
I want to thank C4GC, and I want to thank you, an incredible audience, to be here these couple of hours on a very cold night, so thank you so much. I think one of the defining characteristics that you're going to find between us is this understanding. We in this room, as Americans, as Republicans, as North Carolinians, as folks from across these counties here, we have every reason to be angry and to be hostile about what's happening to our government, because our American birthright is being taken from us. Would you agree? Yes. We have every reason to be angry and scowling. And I've been a part of that, and I know some of us up here have been a part of that. The critical thing when it comes to becoming electable, though, is being able to articulate a vision that's powerful and positive. Talking about the exceptionalism of America, leading with that, because that's going to bring people into the room that aren't here right now, which, by the way, will be much more determining, I'm afraid, of the election than just us in this room. We have to be able to talk about the greatness of America, what the future holds. One of the reasons I'm wearing a gold tie is because of the golden opportunity that's in front of us in America today. The domestic oil and gas production will change the world economy. We're on the precipice of greatness for America. Let's lead it forward. Thank you.
Thank you, C4GC. Thank you, individuals coming here. This is awesome. This is America. I am so optimistic about this race. Every 2 years, we have a term limit. The people that pull the lever are you and I. We make that decision. We're being interviewed again for this job. Do we know that rule book? Do we have experience to making decisions to follow through no matter what happens? The best part about it, who makes that decision? The man or woman in the mirror. You're my lobbyist. This is the best thing in the world. So what we're going to do is we're going to be optimistic, happy warriors. But Ms. Hagan voted for Dodd-Frank that gave Barclays $858 billion. She says she's on the Banking Committee. I read that bill. I want to see why she did that. I'm an OBGYN, talked about woman bill, 25,000 patients. I have 6 girls too, so I know my women, because I know they own my life. I was raised by a single mom. I got a strong woman and 6 little girls who own me. I do because I love them. We do it with love and kindness. Understand that liberty movement is colorblind, economically blind, and we could literally fall on the sword of many one. That's the American exceptionalism. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please give a round of applause to Dr. Frank Brandon. Mr. Bill Flynn. Mrs. Heather Grant. And Mr. Mark Harris. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a straw poll here that we would like to move forward with. If you would fill out this green sheet 1 to 6, I know there are only 4 candidates here, but please fill out these straw forms, the straw poll forms from 1 to 6, and we'll announce the results here shortly.